Now, we on this show make absolutely no editorial judgments on the pharmaceutical merits of these drugs whatsoever. But we are increasingly concerned about the political and cultural implications of this debate. For one thing, take domestic COVID vaccine passports. Now, the very concept of a legal document that makes basic participation in mainstream society contingent on a theoretically voluntary medical treatment is so monstrous, so unprecedented in its incursion into the most basic elements of personal choice, not to mention quaint notions like informed consent. It should terrify all of us that any government anywhere ever is so much as entertaining it. But vaccine passports are just the latest grotesque chapter in a 12-month horror show, the senseless slaughter of our livelihoods and liberties by an insular and self-important political class, drunk on its own perverse saviour complex, willfully and deliberately losing all sense of proportion in relation to a virus that is dangerous, yes, that is harmful, yes, but in no way justifies the past year of utter barbarism committed by the state against its own citizens. Almost always, I might add, without any real scientific merit or even common sense. But there are a handful of politicians who are speaking out against this stuff, and one of them is the member for Hughes and Spectator Australia regular Craig Kelly, who was banned from Facebook yet again this week for speaking out against vaccine passports. Well, there's absolutely no censorship on this show, so we are proud to welcome Craig Kelly on to share his thoughts right here on Spectator Australia TV. Craig Kelly, how are you?
Yeah, no, good to be with you, Gideon. It's here in my office down in Sutherland. It's a bit of a wet afternoon, but fighting fit and looking to a lot of issues that we really need to get stuck into.
Well, it sounds like another extreme weather event caused, no doubt, by climate change. Now, turning away from one apocalyptic hobby horse to another, corona, and specifically vaccine passports. So leaving aside the issue of the medical merits of the vaccine themselves, I am personally very concerned about the precedent that a vaccine passport would create. Am I wrong?
No, look, you're absolutely correct. And firstly, remember what we're talking about here is a domestic vaccine passport, a domestic COVID vaccine passport. So this is not when you travel overseas. Now, in Australia, we can't control what legislation another country has upon the entry of Australian citizens, but we can control what happens within our borders. Now, if we look around the world as what being is proposed, it's a domestic vaccine passport. That means you couldn't go down to the local shopping centre. You couldn't go to the pub. You couldn't go to a cafe. You couldn't go to a footy game. You couldn't go to a concert. You couldn't go to a museum or an art gallery unless you had this government-issued vaccine passport. Now, this is completely contrary to all our freedoms and liberties that, generations of past Australians have fought for. And remember, this is about a COVID vaccine passport. COVID is not a rerun of the bubonic plague or the Spanish flu. That we're going to give up our freedoms, those hard-fought freedoms and liberties that so many generations have fought so hard for on the basis of needing this COVID domestic passport. Really, we need to sit back and think about it. But we've seen even, who you'd think a conservative politician like Boris Johnson, who you think would be on our side of this, is actually talking about it. Thankfully, in the US, I think it's now several states have actually come forward. I think Florida's leading the way with Governor Ron DeSantis over there that's put forward his own executive order prohibiting these things. So we've got to become out very loud, very clear that these things are completely contrary to our liberties and democracy and freedom in Australia and oppose them. So that we make sure that my former colleagues in the Liberal Party, when they're sort of sitting around the cabinet room and tossing up ideas, that if anyone raises the idea of vaccine passports, they need to be shouted down because I'm sure the majority of Australians, when they understand the threats to our liberty and freedoms, will be violently against these things.
Yeah, and you make the good point that we should refer to it as a domestic COVID vaccine passport because this is different from, for example, when I went to Zambia a few years ago, I had to go and have a yellow fever certificate to get into the country. Well, that's fair enough. It's a sovereign country. We don't set the rules, as you said. When we talk about a domestic vaccine passport. What does that look like day to day, and what proposals, if any, are there on the table for such a thing in Australia?
Well, thankfully, there appears to be very little of this in Australia, only whispers of it. The proposals we've seen are from the UK and some from the USA, that basically you would have to have a vaccine passport on your iPhone that shows your vaccines for COVID have been done and are up to date. And again, we don't even know the true efficacy of these vaccines. That's still a big question mark about it. And if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be able to get into the local pub.
Yeah.
You'd have to show your vaccine passport. You know, they might as well like tattoo a number on the front of your forehead or a barcode on the front of your forehead, and you put your head up and you scan your barcode. This cannot be on in our society. Often people have been frightened about COVID. We've had 12 months of a scare campaign, and we can't let fear, we can't surrender our freedoms and liberties based upon what in many cases is a completely irrational fear.
If you told me a year ago that Australians wouldn't be able to leave their own country or wouldn't be able to return to their own country, if you told me a year ago that we would be prevented from travelling 5 kilometres outside our own house, if you told me a year ago that state borders would be shut and families would be separated at borders and we'd have horrible situations like babies dying in utero because people couldn't hop along the border to go to hospital, I would never have believed you. So I guess it falls to people like you and me, frankly, and more so you as a public figure, to get out in front of this and shut it down before it's even contemplated.
So I've been very vocal on my social media, even though I know that Facebook has shadow bans on me and limits my distribution.
Yeah,
I've been very on that. I've also proposed that as soon as Parliament recommences for the budget, which is now in May, I'm going to be seeking to introduce a private member's motion and also a private member's bill. And the beauty of this is I can just mirror what Governor DeSantis has done in Florida. I just maybe got to read out a couple of paragraphs from his particular executive order. It's actually titled, it's Executive Order number 2181, and the title of it is Prohibiting COVID-19 Vaccine Passports. That's the title of his executive order. And in section 1 it says, no Florida government entity or its subdivisions, agents or assigns shall be permitted to use vaccine passports, vaccine passes, or other standardised documentation for the purpose of certifying an individual's COVID-19 vaccination status to a third party or otherwise publish or share any individual's COVID-19 vaccine record or similar health information. Section 2, businesses in Florida are prohibited from requiring patrons or customers to provide any documentation certifying COVID-19 vaccination or post-transmission recovery to gain access to, entry upon, or service from the business. Simple. And what I would hope anyone watching this, write to your local MP and ask them what is their position on this bill. Are they going to support it or are they against it? And if they're not going to support it, let's call them out and let's lobby them and let's put them up and let's make an example of these people. That's, is this really the type of politician that you want elected to go and represent you in Canberra? Someone that's not going to stand up for your freedoms and liberties, as is going to just sell it out because they think there's some short-term political expediency of, sort of going along with this scare campaign.
But look, going back to the DeSantis bill and your private members bill, which is fantastic, and I'm completely on board with section 1. No government in any way should limit participation in civic and communal life based on a theoretically voluntary medication. That is a no-brainer. When it comes to private businesses, I do have a little bit of my inner libertarian is a little bit conflicted here, because if some stupid hipster cafe in Melbourne won't let me in unless I show that I've had, the AstraZeneca jab or whatever, well, look, I might not like it, but they're a private business. So why influence the decisions of private businesses?
We are treading a fine line here. I agree with you. But we do have other restrictions on businesses. They can't discriminate you on the colour of your eyes, the colour of your skin, the colour of your hair. They can't discriminate, based on your race. Why should they be able to discriminate against you? And this is discrimination against someone based upon some medical status that they supposedly have. There's people. Many people have got very legitimate reasons why they may not want to take one of these experimental vaccines, and they are still experimental. We have to acknowledge that even this, we still don't know the full extent of the short-term adverse consequences. There's still a lot of debate about blood clots, a lot of debate in Europe at the moment, so we don't know what it is there. Now, that's the short term. We don't know we have no idea whatsoever what the medium-term adverse consequences is, 2 years, or the long-term adverse consequences. There's also a great debate amongst the medical profession whether someone that has actually had COVID before should actually then take a vaccine, or people in with different types of contraindications, whether they should also be vaccinated. So there's, I think, a good argument for private businesses, especially businesses that have a sort of very oligopoly position in markets where it might be a particular concert, or it might be a particular form of public transport, particular shopping centre. So we already have these. We should have as limited restrictions as possible. But this is to prevent businesses from discriminating people from entry into their premises. And I think that's fair enough.
Turning to the vaccines themselves, look, I have not made much of a comment on the medical merit of the vaccines. I'm just not qualified or capable of doing that. But what is clear is that people are very concerned about these vaccines. They have they have very real concerns. And to me, it just seems like the only answer they're getting out of our so-called leaders is, no, don't believe what you read. Don't do your own research. Don't do your own, inquiries. Just listen to such and such, the mid-level medical bureaucrat. Shut up and take your jab because we know better than you do. Is this helping the cause of vaccinations?
It's straight out of one of Orwell's lines from 1940. Ignorant strength, as long as you're ignorant about this subject, you'll be strong, sort of thing. Look, greater transparency can never, ever hurt. More debate can never, ever hurt. Now, again, in Australia, we've governments, this is one of the golden rules that another example, the governments are not very good at picking winners. In the vaccine race, where we've got vaccines, you've got AstraZeneca, you've got Moderna, you've got Pfizer, you've got Johnson & Johnson, there's the Chinese vaccines, there's the Russian vaccines. So you've had all these competing vaccines. We also had 2 domestic vaccines being produced as well, which were given the kibosh by government. So and we looked at all those vaccines, and governments picked the winner, and they've picked AstraZeneca. And which is the one with the problem with it? As sure as night follows day, whenever government goes out and tries to pick a winner in the marketplace, they pick the dud one. What we know at the moment, Germany. Now, Germany's pretty advanced medically. France, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Canada, and Latvia have all decided that based on the scientific data that they've seen and the reports that they've seen, that the AstraZeneca vaccine should be suspended to, it's either 55 or 60, anyone that's under 55 or 60 years old should be suspended. Now, that's the medical experts in those countries that have looked at the evidence, and they've weighed up and they said, well, we can't be confident that the benefit outweighs the risk. But here in Australia, we've said, no, bugger, that should be right, mate. We think the benefit still outweighs the risk. And this is one of my arguments that has been for a long time. It's not an anti-vaccination argument. It's an argument to apply the precautionary principle and to basically, err on the side of caution in this. Now, we're in Australia, we're in a very unique position. Every different nation is going to have a different risk-benefit analysis depending on how bad COVID is in their particular society at one time. Now, if you're in the UK, when they were at the peak of the pandemic, where they had very high death rates, very high infection rates, that's a completely different situation to what we have here in Australia, where we've basically got zero community transmission, or close to zero I think, was it Melbourne, something like 30 days, 40 days since you've had 50 days, since you've had even one community transmission in Victoria. The only way we're getting community transmission has been mix-ups in the hotel quarantine program. So your chances in Australia of catching COVID in the suburbs are basically a zero, which is different to the rest of the world. So surely from that position, we can sit back and we say, okay, let's watch what's happening in the rest of the world. Let's not panic. Let's not rush. Let's learn from any potential mistakes that they are making. But the problem we've had the Labor Party, we've had the great geniuses of the Labor Party out there. Oh, Rush, you've got to get all this done. We want millions of people vaccinated. And then you've had the coalition government falling into the trap of setting these targets where you have so many things in your supply chain outside of your control. Anyone that's been involved in logistics know that when there's all these things outside of your control, you're very, very careful promising what you can deliver. So the government's now panicking that they're behind in this rollout, even though it's all arbitrary. Guys, surely just sit back, look at the data that's coming out of Europe, look at the data that's coming out of the US and Canada. Let's plan this all. And if everything's fine, okay, then let's go ahead and vaccinate as many people as want to be vaccinated. But in the meantime, why are we rushing it out here in Australia? Where other countries that have got a far greater benefits to achieve than we have decided to pause. It simply doesn't. It's not common sense, and it's just not logical.
Yeah, and look, that's a really good point, because I've made the point that, look, I'm not averse to whacking Scott Morrison. I think he deserves a whack on many things, but I don't think these so-called supply issues are really something that I would be teeing off on him.
Of course they're not. But this is the thing. You just pick up any paper or you just go along with the mainstream media. And it's all, the government has failed. It's been a disaster because they haven't been able to rush this vaccine out. There's no rush in Australia.
No.
We've got the ability to, especially when we are doing something, right, when we are basically involved in a giant experiment that we don't truly know what the true adverse risks are. No one knows. I said, no one knows what the adverse risks are for this long-term and medium-term. We don't even know yet what the true adverse risks are of the blood clots in the short term. Surely, given our unique position of our island continent, no COVID, basically zero COVID infections within our Australian borders, surely we've got the luxury. Let's take advantage of the situation we're in. Sit back and just watch. But no, it's this panicked rush to meet these arbitrary deadlines.
Craig Kelly, I'll be honest with you, I see how this will go. We'll put this video up on YouTube and people will start weighing in saying, how could you give that terrible Craig Kelly a platform because he's sowing doubt about we don't know the consequences. How terrible is that? But to be brutally honest, all you are saying is exactly what I hear from ordinary people every day. And I think with this vaccine, this perceived slowness of the rollout, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the take-up rate has been low. People just aren't rushing out to get them. And I look at somebody like myself, I'm 33 years old. As you said, there's no COVID where I am. God knows there isn't, because we've set the whole town on fire to absolutely stamp it out at all costs. Even if I get the coronavirus, again, I'm 33, I have a modest 99.5% chance of survival or something like that. Look, I was
looking at some of those numbers about 20 minutes ago. I think it's 99.95, Gideon. I think you've missed out.
99.95.
You've overestimated by a factor of 10 there, I think.
So I'm even more invincible than I thought I was. But look, the point is, look, I'm not averse to getting the vaccine in principle, but I'm glad I'm not on the priority list. I'm happy to wait. I think that's the position most Australians are in. So what are we achieving by sneering at them and saying, no, you absolutely have to enthusiastically get this thing come what may and just ignore all these reports you've heard?
Well, Gideon, again, it's that ignorance is strength argument that those of a totalitarian bent think that, you can instruct everyone what to do. The way you get people to do something is that, you line them up and you hit them with the whip and you enforce this. If it does turn out that, the vaccine's the best thing since sliced bread, the best way to do it is to have open and transparent debate.
Correct.
Have the arguments backwards and forwards and be fully transparent and say what the percentage risks are and say, look, we're just going to be very cautious first. That's how you will build confidence in it. Not sort of going ahead gung-ho, and anyone that has any contrary opinion saying you must be silenced, you must be deplatformed. That's not going to build confidence in anything.
Look, the other thing that strikes me about this debate, and we've spoken privately about this over and over and over again to each other, I'm open to vaccines, I really am, but I think we should be also open to any and all potential treatments, early treatments. Now, this is something that you have been absolutely skewered on for no good reason. Where is that debate at, and why is it people will not contemplate things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin? I'm pretty sure we'll get booted off YouTube just for uttering those words, but, nevertheless.
Ivermectin, with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, firstly, what's important, they're both what is called zinc ionophores. So they both combine with zinc to help the zinc get into the cells. That's something that some of our learned professors have told me why they are similar drugs in that way. And ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine has shown, the studies have shown it's very effective in the early stages. In the late stages, it's been shown to have a very limited effect. And the prophylaxis studies, where you take it beforehand to prevent you getting the virus, again, some of the studies are mixed. But when it comes to ivermectin, for all three stages, as a prophylaxis to prevent you from catching the virus in the first place, the early stage and the late stage, the studies are showing enormous results. Now, on prophylaxis, there are currently 12 published studies. Now, these are studies published in the medical literature, carried out by teams of researchers and medical professors from all around the world. Now, the average of those 12 studies, when you look up at something like 7,000 patients have been involved, you've got an 89% efficacy.
Jeez.
Now, that is actually better. This is the thing. That is better than what the results of the AstraZeneca have shown in their studies. So if you're looking at the data and you were saying, which one would you take if I'm worried about that I'm a high risk of COVID, which one am I going to take? Well, on which one's going to most likely to prevent you, on the data, you'd have to go the ivermectin. You've got 12 studies from around the world that have basically shown very, very similar results. The most stunning result was a study out of hospitals in Argentina. And this was done by a Professor Hector Cavallo that was actually coordinated the studies. Now, what he did this across 4 hospitals in Argentina. He gave one group ivermectin and a nasal spray as well, which he said the nasal spray he didn't think was the important part of the ivermectin. And when I say gave ivermectin, you're talking about 2 tablets every 7 days. So it's not as though you've got to dose yourself up, right? That costs cents, right? And these are amongst hospital workers. And the other group, they just had their normal mask, gowns, and protective equipment on. Now, you can imagine in Argentina, they are not a wealthy country like Australia is. They used to be decades of bad left-wing governments.
Yep, and money printing.
Argentina doesn't have the wealth. They don't have the hospitals that we can afford in our country. So you can imagine the COVID's running right through there for society. So these 2 groups, the group there was 422 people in the group that they didn't give ivermectin to, and they had an infection rate after 3 months of 58%. So more than half of those 422 people working in the hospitals, this is doctors, nurses, orderlies, janitors, receptionists, more than half of them tested positive for COVID. You can imagine that in a busy, crowded hospital. The group they gave the ivermectin to, 788 people, right? Have a guess how many tested positive for COVID. Well, in the other group is 50%. It was zero.
Zero.
Not one of that 788 group became infected with COVID.
And that's a prophylactic. It's not a treatment for people who have COVID. This is just avoiding it altogether.
So they gave it to the healthcare workers with the idea, will this stop them from catching COVID? Now, this study is peer-reviewed and it's published in a medical journal. And it's not just a one-off study. It's one of 12 other studies that show very similar results.
Yeah.
And yet, people say, "Oh, no, it doesn't work. It's it's what is Albanese? Oh, it's snake oil or something. It's a snake oil treatment, and it doesn't work. It's even the Australian newspaper wrote an article saying, oh, it's a treatment for parasites. And we've got our top medical people in this country swearing by it, some of our top medical professors, saying that it should be rolled out, and yet we've got doctors from around the world that are using these treatments. One we came across yesterday was a doctor, and I've spoken with these doctors personally myself, Dr. George Fareed and a Dr. Brian Tyson out of California. Now, they've treated now over 4,500 COVID patients. You wanted to speak to someone that actually had experience treating COVID patients. You might ask these two blokes, like, what have you done? How have you gone, right? Out of 4,500, they said they've had 2 deaths. And that was that came to them late, and they basically didn't get all their treatment. So I said, everyone that has gone on their treatment and is a high-risk patients, they've kept them all alive, right? But these people are ignored, and we're listening to medical bureaucrats in our country that haven't seen a single or treated a single COVID patient.
And this is the problem with this debate since day one. We have ignored and sneered at doctors on the ground who actually treat patients. We have legally prevented them from prescribing the medications they think are best for their own individual patients. And
in Queensland have had something like, I think 1,490 odd COVID cases for 7 deaths, including another tragic death, I think, in the last couple of days, right? Remember, Fareed and Dr. Tyson have had 3 times as many COVID patients that they've treated. High-risk patients, they've had 2 deaths. So their death rate is 1/10 of that, of what's happening in Queensland. And yet those 2 doctors, the treatments that they use of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, their treatment protocol, they would be jailed for 6 months in Queensland. You've got a health chief medical officer in Queensland that hasn't treated a COVID patient. There's a law in place that would see Dr. Brian Tyson and Dr. George Fareed jailed for 6 months. And yet they can show that they've had 1/10 look at death rate per COVID patients, 1/10 that of Queensland.
Just lastly, what does it say about the debate over public health in this country that we will go down the road of these absurd and evil lockdowns? We will ruin thousands of lives and we will do it with the stroke of a pen. Yet when it comes to doctors who have genuinely helpful ideas on how to actually treat the disease, we reject it out of hand. What is wrong with the state of the science and our politics?
Look, there's a few lessons to take out of this. One is the dangers of centralising power and control in a small group.
Right on.
Our chief medical officers are basically being promoted to the status where they're often above the legislature. They're above the parliament. They're dictating to the parliament. Right? Now, in many cases, with the greatest respect to them, they are not as highly qualified in this particular field as many people working in the private sector are. So what I think we should do, any of these particular positions of chief medical officer, right, we should have a continual change of position. So if you're in a pandemic, whoever is, because what happens, it's human nature. If I make a bad decision in any form of life, often the next decision I make down the track, there's reluctance to admit that you've made an error. Or there's reluctance to admit, well, I've got to say that I was wrong and change things and go around 180 degrees, right? You can't have that in public health. You can't have that in a pandemic situation. So the decision that they make today is trying to cover up the mistakes for the position that they've made before. I think what you would be far better having is having a much wider a panel of experts, and you, rather than just have sort of one person in control, you have to have some way where you're continually having someone new come in to review it, because if they can find that there's been a problem with the decision before, It's much easier for someone new to reverse it. It's like often you see with company structures. A CEO gets in there and he thinks something's right, and he keeps sort of like, what they say, you keep digging a hole sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you need often a new CEO to come in and go, hang on, guys, you had it completely wrong. We've got to reverse track.
I say we just get rid of all these clowns, these mid-level medical bureaucrats. We bring it back to family doctors, local GPs. We let people make their own decisions. We encourage people to do their own research about what's going into their bodies, rather than saying that it's somehow irresponsible or negligent. And we just have to democratise healthcare, because again, I've said this a few times today, but my body, my choice. But look, Hughes Craig Kelly, thank you for all the work you do. I'm pretty jaded about politics these days, I must say, but you being in the House of Representatives gives me a lot of hope. We'll talk again soon. And finally, when are you going to next write something for the Spectator Australia?
I'll have to. And I read a couple of series as well there. I know I was the number one, what you see on Rowan's list of most popular columnists there. I think I was number one there for quite a few times. So I should get back into it.
We're looking for your next blockbuster hit. Well, anyway, thanks so much again, Craig Kelly, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gideon. All the best.
Cheers, mate.